Welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Pearl from Jefferson Independent School District Police Department. He is in his 12th year of law enforcement, and we're here to talk about wellness and some strategies for longevity. So, welcome to the show, Chief Pearl. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to kind of dive in and see what we can offer to everybody who's tuning in this week.
I am as well, and I was hoping we could start with a little bit of background on you. Who are you? How'd you get started in law enforcement? What did those 12 years look like for you?
Yeah, I started actually not really super interested in law enforcement. I was working for the wildlife division in the state of Georgia and basically a state paid farmer. So I got to ride around on a tractor and it was awesome. And then just kind of felt the call to something more, something a little bit more than just who I was and what I was doing. So I looked around at which state across the country had the best, Parks and Wildlife or Department of Natural Resources to work for. By the grace of God, ended up in Texas. So I wasn't born here, but I got here as quick as I could. And my first 10 to 11 years in law enforcement was as a state game warden. So everything from, playing around on the border to getting on special operations team doing operations all across the state. A lot of boat driving, a lot more boat driving than I would have appreciated, but a lot of learning in that. And kind of towards the end of my time with them, I was spending a lot of time at our academy, so training the new recruits and firearms and combatives and use of force and kind of all over the place, and just saw the value that or saw the value in getting good quality people who care and want to see everybody else succeed into those kinds of positions. And, when I left, we had a great cadre at the academy, really invested in each and every single one of those cadets for the entire 8 months that they were there. And, seeing that and seeing now that the after effects of that when those guys hit the field and they're 4 or 5 years into their career now, seeing them flourishing and not just surviving day to day or year to year, but actually improving and getting better, just from all the lessons that they learned there and how to succeed for a lifetime.
Yeah, no, and you reminded me of something. You mentioned that you kind of looked up at one point and you looked around and you're like, I want something better for my life or something different for my life. And then you took action. And now 12 years later, you're the chief and we're talking about wellness. And so I think that there has to be those moments in life. And I've had those moments in my life where, you know, I don't know if we talked offline a little bit, but I used to be a professional skydiver. And there was this moment where like I looked up and I was like, who do I want to be? Do I want to be anyone around me? And it was no fault to them and it was no judgment to them, but it was like, what do I want for my life? And it was like, I wanted something better. I wanted something with more meaning and more purpose. And so then I started to take the steps in that direction of, okay, how can I achieve that? And like, how can I get there to accomplish that goal? And I think that if you're always having that mindset of how can I improve myself? How can I reach my goals and to be a better version of myself? And it doesn't necessarily mean hopping career to career, but it could be within your career and your skill set of saying, okay, like look around and say, who do I want to emulate? And then try to find those people. And it sounds to me like there were people within the training academy that you were like, wow, these are good quality people that are doing a really great job. They care, they're putting in the effort to build up the next generation of officers. And you're like, that's what I want to be. Like, I want to be that leader who is, helping people to improve and to thrive in this career.
Yeah, and I think we all have inherently in us this desire for something more than ourselves.
Mm.
And not to say that you can't be very successful and be very self-centered, but I think when you kind of take a step back and you look at the lives of those people, those high drive individuals who are so, inward focused, despite all the accolades, despite all the bank accounts or the experiences, there's not the satisfaction there that they were chasing. Whereas you look at somebody who's devoted their whole life to service to others, whether they're, you know, famous, successful, as we deem it to be successful or not, those people are way more satisfied with life.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that that is something that's inside all of us, and especially those in the first responder world. Like, let's face it, nobody gets into law enforcement because we want to be rich and famous. Like that's that's just not the career field to choose for that. But when we dedicate a, a 20, 30, 40 year career to serving other people, and you can look back at that and say, man, I gave more of myself than I took.
Mhm.
But in that, I feel like a much more complete person, and I had a much more complete career, because that's where we're drawn to.
I agree. And, I always get that question of, for me, they're like, why law enforcement or why first responders? Like, why do you work with them? And I always make the joke, and it is a joke that I was like, there's a lot of easier places that I could be, teaching these things than to like a room full of cops. But it's to your point. I did it all. I started in the wellness space because it saved my life in many ways, and I wanted to facilitate that for others. I believed in the training methods, and I wanted to be a facilitator of the training methods. It's not to say that I thought I could save somebody's life or change someone's life, but I believed that what we were doing could benefit other people. So I started in this wellness space in that, service mentality. But then through the years, I felt like I lost that a little bit. I felt like I was, really teaching an environment that felt like empty, and kind of just like put on like hip hop music, and like it didn't feel like I was really getting to that why I started in the first place. And so it was another one of those pivotal moments in my life where I looked around, I was like, man, like I really don't feel like I'm helping people in the way that I want to. And I had an opportunity to teach at an academy. And it was volunteer. I was, like you're saying, like it was not a space for me to make money or, and to be quite honest, there were a few people who were championing me, but I think the general consensus was like, we don't get it. Like, why is she here? Like, this isn't a part of our culture. And of course, that has changed over time. But it wasn't because I was famous or popular, and it wasn't because I was making money, but it was in that environment where I was like, wow, I feel like this takes me back to my why. And I felt like I was actually helping people. And, fast forward now, all I do is work with first responders. But I think that when you start to think of your mortality and, what is your legacy, and I say that loosely because I think sometimes that can be ego driven. But if you're like, okay, what impact did I make on someone else's life or on this world? I feel good about the choices, right? And I feel like I did make a difference. And I think that a lot of first responders can, I mean, I would say all first responders can look back and confidently say that, like I made a difference in someone's life. I made, small changes in the world. And I think that that is that service mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that goes back to like what's in us. There's just this inherent drive to think generationally.
Mm-hmm.
You know, throughout scripture, we're commanded to diligently teach our children and to raise them up in the way that they should go. And that's just, yes, we have to be told, and predominantly as the fathers, we have to be told because we're idiots, and we need to be told a whole lot. But I think it speaks to the fact that we have this legacy, and it's a generational impact that one person can have on down the line. And if we think of others first, right? If I think of my grandkids before I think of myself, I start making better choices so that my kids will learn better habits, better practices. They will see things bigger than themselves, and so they'll be able to teach my grandkids and their kids, and it's just it continues on down the line where when we start getting lax, um and especially law enforcement leadership is probably one of the easiest place to see where that falls off is we're going to hire somebody and bring them up the chain of command who's not as capable or not as qualified as I am, and all of a sudden we get a bunch of idiots sitting in the big seat and we call them post turtles, right? because if you ever seen a turtle on a fence post, you know he didn't get there by himself. And now that he's there, he's not really sure what he's supposed to be doing.
Mm,
Um, and so, these people who refuse to see the generational impact that they can have by raising up good people below them, raising up people better than you below you, has a huge impact. And what you do in the law enforcement space is like, let's face it, there's not a whole lot of cops who go out and work a beat who do what you do.
mm.
And so, looking out and finding those resources. Hey, I don't know what I'm doing here, but I see it's beneficial. Can I go find that and find someone better than me to teach me, and will in turn teach the next generation and the next generation.
It's 100% a ripple effect. And I say this all the time, and I truly believe it that you never know the impact you can have on somebody, and that can be positive or negative. And so you have that opportunity to choose like, do I want to uplift people? Do I want to teach people? Do I want to help them? I love that you said be better than me. And I think that sometimes as humans, we're threatened by that, right? Like we want to be the best. And so we don't want to have this idea of like people being better than you because then maybe it makes you feel less than. But like I think that's the biggest compliment is if you can train someone to be even better than you are, and then that's progressing everything forward. And I've had conversations about in my space too of like how can I train other people to be better than me so that it improves everybody? And so I love that you said that, and it is a ripple effect. But what I want to say is that it does have to start with you and how good you are physically, mentally, emotionally, because you have to be well enough to be able to train other people and to show up for other people and, be there for your kids and your grandkids. And so, in the context of wellness, we've talked a little bit offline about what that looks like and how to, create more longevity in this career. I know that you are a fan, and I am too, of scientific, data-driven approaches to wellness. And I know that there are a lot of different trends with wellness. What are some of the trends that you're seeing and some of the things that maybe you're adopting currently today in the wellness space?
So I think it's prioritizing your physical well-being and the impact that has on your mental well-being.
Mm,
We're seeing guys, and I can't name this study, but it came out recently that heavy deadlifts in and of themselves have a more positive chemical impact on your brain than SSRIs, regular exercise and SSRIs, but just heavy deadlifts. And you start thinking like, well, why is that? Well, heavy deadlifts are hard,
hmm
especially when you do more than one of them at a time, right? Like, and so we walk up to this challenge and we see the weight there and we see the bar, and as we pick it up and we struggle, now we have a victory. And it's not like the social media dopamine dump that you get on Instagram or Facebook, but it's this, no, I actually applied myself and I reached this goal. And so you're seeing people start to understand that, hey, I feel mentally better when I feel physically better.
hmm
And that's why you see, and as trendy as they are, like the High Rocks and the CrossFit and Orange Theory and all these, silly little fads that go on. At the end of the day, are they getting people out exercising, feeling better, performing better? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
And whatever it happens to be, like I'm not a fan of any of those things. But do I see people get the positive benefits through that? You see people moving away from like the traditional bodybuilding set, because especially in law enforcement, we see people who just do a typical bodybuilder split with no mobility. Now all of a sudden they feel like crap on Friday because they've been stiffening up all week, sitting behind a desk or sitting in a patrol vehicle with a gun belt on. And they're
Yeah.
like, I thought this was supposed to make me feel better, but it's not. It's like, yeah, because you're doing it like an idiot. And there's people like you who really focus and prioritize on mobility. And when we can move better, we start to feel better. And when we feel better, we move more. And then when we move more, we continue to move better. And it's just a positive feedback cycle. So I'm starting to see the trends, especially in these younger guys that are coming on, of prioritizing health and fitness. And, they're happier at their job. They experience more job satisfaction. They go home and they're better husbands, better wives, better family contributors just because they see the importance that, hey, here's the foundation. Let me continue to build. And that's one thing our last fitness guy did at the academy was he said, okay, instead of just kicking you into the dirt for the first 6 weeks of the academy until you quit because you showed up not ready, we're actually going to teach you the movements
Mm,
and we're going to educate you. And once you're educated, now you'll start doing it when you don't have to because it's fun and you see the positive benefits. When I first started my career, you go to a training at the academy and you get a whole bunch of guys together. Nobody's in the gym after training hours. We've spent all day on the range or all day in the classroom, whatever it happens to be. No one's in the gym. My last 5 years, my goodness, like you couldn't find a dumbbell in there because there were so many people crowded in because we all understood now how important it is. And instead of just, frying chicken and drinking beer after a long day, we're going to prioritize our health. And guess what? We wake up feeling better the next day.
100%. And I love that you said movement, because I always say this. I think people can relate to this. If you don't bend, you break. And it's this idea of longevity. And I think that that changes throughout our lives of what that looks like. Like as we get older, maybe the movements that we do or the exercises that we do are going to look a little bit different than when we're younger. And I think that you can evolve your wellness over time. But this idea of being able to move. And I always try to ask everyone to relate to their why. Why is it important for them to be physically and mentally well? And I agree with you that they do go hand in hand. And anyone who's listening can relate to that. You've never ever left a workout and felt worse, probably. Unless like maybe you hurt yourself or whatever, it's like a one-off. But if you do like
A self-induced ouch.
yeah, but if like you go in and you do like some sort of physical exercise or you get out and you walk, like it could be something simple, you always feel better. And so, why is it important for you to be well? And for me, like I do not want to end up in my 60s, 70s, 80s, and I can't move. And I'm just stuck in this like sedentary lifestyle waiting to die. I don't want that. I've seen that with a number of my family members who, didn't prioritize their wellness, didn't prioritize their movement and what that did to them. And I don't want to be like that. And I think that it's again kind of goes back to those moments of like looking up and looking out and figuring out what do you want and what do you not want and how can you achieve those things. And I think that if you can start to identify that of like, I want a long and successful career, I want a long and successful life, I want to be able to move and be active in my retirement, then it makes those decisions on how to get there day to day a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the old adage, motion is lotion. When you stop moving, you stop being able to move. And so, it goes back to our earlier conversation with generational impacts. Like the most important generation for us is going to be our kids and then our grandkids. And if you prioritize your health, at some point, Lord willing, you'll be able to retire and you'll have all the free time in the world to play with your kids and your grandkids. And do you want to experience those moments of joy when you can toss your grandkid up in the air and see them laugh and scream and think you're going to drop them, but them to have the confidence to know that you're there and you're going to protect them and you're going to be around for as long as possible.
Yeah.
That's a little selfish of me, but my parents and my wife's parents are both kind of taking turns watching the kids over the summer and seeing they have more energy when they're wrapped up with my kids because let's face it, they're a handful. Um, but they have more energy and they're more excited. Like they go to bed dog tired every night for sure. But it's great to see just the constant motion, the constant, not just physically, but they got to stay on their mental game too, and it's keeping everybody just a little bit younger, and it's super encouraging to see that affecting generations on both sides.
Well, I think it also goes back to what you said of like, if you are setting that example, then everyone underneath of you, and this could be in your home life or in work life, they want to be that way, you know? So now your kids are going to see you active in your older age and they're going to want to be that way so that they can be there for their kids, you know? And so it's this, again, that like cyclical ripple effect that happens. And it's the same within an organization and within policing. You know, you're setting the example for younger generations to follow. So if they see you as a leader, active, taking care of your wellness, prioritizing it, even though there's challenges with that and there's time constraints and you have a family and you have all these different hats and things you're juggling, those people are going to want to be like you and they're going to want to follow in those footsteps and take care of themselves too. So I think it goes back to that idea of like, you don't know the impact that you can have on other people, positive or negative, and let's see how we can, veer more on that positive side of things. I wanted to talk a little bit about something you said when we talked offline. You said the minimum effective dose. Can you explain what you meant by, especially in the context of like physical fitness or wellness in general, what does the minimal effective dose mean?
Well, I'll hit you back with another question real
Mhm.
quick.
Okay,
What is the biggest excuse that you hear from people about prioritizing health?
I don't have time across the
I don't
board.
have time. Right. And
For
so,
sure.
similar, I coach and our target audience is law enforcement. And so, A, doing something is better than doing nothing.
Yep.
But then, like I said, I'm a little bit of a data nerd. And so, like, what is the maximum amount of return we can get on the minimum amount of work?
Yep.
And so I think a lot of that turns into intensity. And that's not necessarily saying, okay, can you do 100 burpees in 10 minutes? Ready, go. And that's your workout for the day. It's 10 minutes, you're in and out, but like that sucks. But
Yeah.
can we see a progression across, a 30-year career with reducing injuries and improving resiliency and still making forward progress? So, when you're 30 years into it and, for the studs who work a 30-year career on the beat, instead of promoting up the chain, it can still catch the dude who runs from him on a traffic stop, who runs from him down the road. Like those are the guys who understand that, hey, I've just got to do a little bit every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think Pat McNamara, he said it's small incremental improvements over time.
Yeah.
And so, and I relate everything back to our faith, but similar to sanctification, am I a little bit better today than I was yesterday? And am I working to be a little bit better tomorrow than I am today?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to see huge leaps and bounds like the way we program. There are other programs you can follow where you see these massive spikes in performance gains. And then you see a massive decrease because we get injured from overtraining or we get so wrapped up into the numbers that we don't prioritize form or, especially in your realm, mobility. And now all of a sudden, that 8 week shoot is set back 6 weeks. And so it's taken us 14 weeks to make 2 weeks worth of progress.
Yep.
Where when we program, not on a season schedule or not on a deployment schedule, but, our cops are on patrol 365 days a year for
Mm-hmm.
30 years. Like it is a grueling op tempo that these guys have to be on. And so we program wisely
Mm-hmm.
so that yes, you may not see these massive jumps or massive improvements, but you're going to see consistent improvement from the time you start with us to the time you retire. And our goal is that by that point, like you have enough tools in your tool belt to just keep moving.
Yeah. I really like the small steps create big impact over time. And we do see it all the time. You know, there's like a burnout that happens when you go like full speed, like pedal down, and then it drops off because it's not sustainable. And so I agree with this idea of how can we look at it more like that marathon of like we're going to do something every day to keep that consistency. I think consistency is key for everything. And how can we build on that over time instead of, like you said, that huge spike and then that huge drop off. And this is something I had to learn over time, especially working in this population. When I started out, I came from a traditional background of teaching these things, right? And so I did work with professional athletes, I worked with the general public, I did really everything. But every time I would do a session, it would be an hour, sometimes 75 minutes, depending. So I came out the gate like with what I knew. I was like, okay, this is, what we do. And then I had time and time again, I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time, and I realized to tell a first responder to do an hour long anything is hard. And so I had to do what you did is kind of look at it and say, okay, like how can we be the most effective in the shortest amount of time and what does that look like? And so diving into research and figuring out like what what are the areas that we definitely need to focus on for longevity, especially working, in law enforcement, we know the most common areas of injury, shoulders, backs, knees. And so how can we improve those areas in a consistent way over time in the shortest way possible? And so when it comes to mobility, 10 minutes can reduce risk of injury by almost 60% or up to 60%. And so it's like 10 minutes 60% reduction in injury. That's huge. But then you have someone who's going to be like, well, I don't have 10 minutes. And so then my rebuttal to that is yes, you do. But how can we create the consistency of that so that it becomes easier and more like ingrained into your routine? And so I'm on board with everything that you said, and I agree. It's like it's longevity that we're looking for.
Well, even, to hit that 10 minutes, if you do 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the afternoon,
Yeah.
again, doing something is better than nothing, especially for us desk jockeys now, right? Like,
Mhm.
can you stand up once an hour and just move?
Mhm.
Like you don't have to go walk around the halls or you don't have to go walk down the street, but just stand up and move a little bit. We've put out a few videos of like a standing, five, really a 2 to 5 minute standing stretch that you can do at your desk or next to your patrol car. Just something because let's face it, like if you work out before shift and then those hammies, that whole posterior chain starts to tighten up, man,
Sitting
like
all day. Yeah.
we know how miserable that can get. But if you just get up once an hour or um, every couple hours even and just kind of move and shake it out,
Yep.
you see a tremendous benefit from that. And it's something simple.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit offline and I try to remember as many stats as I can. It's difficult because there's a lot out there, but one of the ones that stuck with me in the context of sedentary lifestyle and sitting, because I sit behind my desk, I do these podcasts, I run a business, so a lot of what I do is behind the computer. I saw a stat that said sitting for long periods of time increases your risk of heart attack by like 147%. And I was like, whoa, okay. And if anything made me stand up quicker, it was that. Like that was the fastest I stood up and was like, okay, I got to move a little bit. And
Yeah.
so it's all intertwined, right? And it's not just physical. It's stress. It increases your stress, your heart health. And so how can we, like you said, integrate really small things throughout the day that are going to have a huge impact on your overall wellness long term?
Yeah. And, I think part of that comes from the chain of command. Guys sitting in my seat across the country saying, hey, I understand that our guys are 1.5 times more likely to die from a cardiac event than anything else.
Yep.
We have 100 heart attacks a year for line of duty deaths and, 30 to 40 feloniously killed.
Mhm.
Um, that's a stat that we should be taking, a whole lot of care in digesting because, we'll buy our guys new guns and we'll buy them new vehicles and we'll put, bullet resistant glass in the cars and we'll get them the newest, greatest vest. And then we won't give them the tools that they need to actually survive.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah, we can teach them how to win a gunfight, but are we going to teach them how to win at just not dying? Like
yeah,
it's as simple as that. And so when you get a 60% body fat chief or agency head who says, guys, you need to prioritize health, like it's kind of like a turd in a punch bowl. Nobody's gonna really see it for 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 anything other than what it is. And so I think it's on us in admin because we're killing our guys faster than anything. We're encouraging them to be sedentary. We're overworking them. And when they're overworked, they're stressed and they feel like they have less time. And when you're working, 3 or 4 doubles a week, then where does your time for the gym go when you have to account for your family and everything else? And all those cortisol levels continue to rise and all your cardiac event markers and your blood work continue to rise. And before you know it, like you're 40 pounds overweight and you have a heart attack and die.
yeah,
Like what example are we setting for our guys? So how can we take these small incremental steps and realize that this is not this is not just a money saving adventure for us. Like, yes, it will save our healthcare costs to have a bunch of fit, healthy guys motivated and confidently doing the job. It'll save us in litigation when they know how to handle somebody safely. But like these are people. and so much, the higher you climb up, the heavier your collar gets in law enforcement, the I think the more you forget that you actually have people that you're responsible for.
yeah. And people are your most valuable asset. And I think sometimes, um, to your point, if you're investing in equipment and, things of that nature, but you're not investing in wellness, it's like, are you investing in your most valuable asset? Are you investing in your people? And we know that right now, people aren't lined up to enter into this profession. Hiring is a huge challenge across the country right now. And so I think now more than ever, retention is so crucial and critical. And how can you support the people who are wanting to do this job, who are dedicating their lives to be in this career? What are the things that you can put in place? How can you set the example, in leadership and make sure that, what you're preaching is being backed up by action? I think is kind of what you were alluding to is like, people aren't going to follow in your footsteps if you're not taking those steps. If you're just saying, hey, it's important, then it lacks the substance that I think is required for people to want to follow in those footsteps. And are you making sure that they have everything that they need to, and we talked about this offline, but it's not just survive the job. Like how can we take it a step further? How can we make sure that they thrive? And that's really important. How can we retain them? How can we make sure that they do want to be in this career for 30 years and they don't, want to leave and choose a different profession entirely? How do we reduce burnout? How can we reduce suicide and the risk of that? Like what are the things that can be put in place to create more of that longevity on and off the job?
And on that note, I will challenge every chief who listens to this or just every chief in general. Go ask your guys if they recommend this career to anyone.
Mm,
And I think we'd all be surprised that, man, most cops are telling people they shouldn't be cops
mm,
because, what once was a storied profession and has so much prestige about it, like we have neutered it to the point where like nobody wants to do this job because it's going to kill us faster than the bad guys will.
mm,
Um, you know, I, we say it often, but law enforcement, we're our own biggest enemies. But when we start taking these small incremental steps and we start prioritizing, just like the Green Beret mantra, it's humans over hardware. If we start prioritizing the people that are actually out there doing the job, I think we'll start to see that pendulum start to shift. And, it everything's cyclical, like we've already mentioned. I think what we're starting to the younger generation understand and appreciate just what it takes to do the job and not just do the job, but do it extraordinarily well.
mm.
Most people have an oath that says, my life, or I will live my life above reproach, both on and off duty. And, I get chill bumps thinking about that because you look around the profession and like how many guys are actually living according to that. But this newer generation, this younger generation of cops that are coming up, like they're embodying every bit of that oath, and they take it to heart, and they're out there living it and doing it. And you see the community response to it.
Mhm.
Like, oh no, we don't want Billy Joe coming out and taking this call. We want, Danny, the guy who's 2 years out of the academy, the guy with 18 years on, he doesn't care, but Danny does. Danny
Yeah.
cares.
I think the question that I have is, do we think that every new officer has that same bright-eyed, bushy-tailed approach? And, does that fade over time for everybody? Or, how can we maintain that excitement over a 30-year career? A lot of the conversations that I have with other leadership is, everyone comes out the gate so excited, and then there's maybe a 3-year point or a 5-year point or a 7 to 9 year. There's always these different times within the career where you start to maybe see a loss for that excitement, and maybe a little bit more negativity or feeling a little jaded, or how can you maintain that over time? And you said this, that sometimes the culture can be the worst enemy. And I was hoping that maybe you can explain, like, maybe some of the things that you're seeing within the culture that are maybe detrimental to wellness and to maintaining that excitement over a long career. Maybe what are some of the things that can be changed culturally? Because I really hesitate to say that the culture needs to be changed, because I think that there's so many good things about the
Yeah.
culture. And so I think that that's where you start to get that resistance of everyone's like, no, like, we don't want to change, who we are in policing. And I think that to a certain extent, that's true. Like, there are some core values and some things in this profession that are so admirable and so positive and good. But to your point, maybe there are some things that could be improved upon. And so I was hoping you could talk about what you think is, maybe the worst enemy, like you said, in the culture of policing.
Well, I'll preface this, and I stole this from a good instructor friend of mine. So you see this knife, right?
Mhm.
And I love this knife. I use it regularly. And if you look at the blade, there's going to be nicks and there's going to be imperfections and all these things. Does that mean I need to throw it away and get a new knife? No, but we need to polish it out. We need to work on it. We need to give some time and attention and some care to these pain points so that we can start getting a whole and complete blade again. And, you
Mm.
know, I, he was using that as far as skill sets, but I think it can apply to the culture of law enforcement, right? Like overall, like you will see some of the absolute best in humanity wearing that uniform, putting it on with a smile on their face and going home just dog tired at the end of a shift. And, that is the salt of the earth. Those are the people who truly understand that they have been called into this profession and that they serve a higher power than themselves. Um, but that's not everybody, right? Um, as far as just, do we see that all new officers are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed? No, like you're never going to have 100% win on anything. But we're seeing a positive trend. But as far as just the cultural things that we can start improving, I think it all, not saying that just because I'm on this podcast, but I think it starts around wellness. Now we're teaching cadets how to be physically fit. Well, some states are doing completely away with physical fitness standards, but that's neither here nor there for this. But when we start teaching them a foundational understanding of why wellness matters physically, they start to get it. Okay, why does shooting matter? Why do combatives matter? Um, I'll give a huge kudos to my agency. They encourage us all to go through Gil Martin's book.
Mhm.
Um, and I forget the name of it, but you know,
Emotional survival.
emotional survival for law enforcement. And then they encouraged us to bring our wives and our families along with us for that ride. Like it involves this whole picture. You can't isolate any particular part of what's wrong without looking how it affects the whole.
Mm.
Just like Paige, if you were to focus on somebody who had tight hips, like you're looking at way more than just the hips. to see what got us here. Is it hamstrings? Is it back? Is it stress? Is it posture? Like all these things play into what we see as the pain point. And with law enforcement, it's low back and hips, it's knees, and it's upper extremities, so shoulders, elbows, wrists, things like that. Those are our big pain points. But if we only focus on like, hey, we're going to make bulletproof wrists for this 12-week cycle, like you're going to miss out on so much because you have to look at the whole picture, the whole person. And so, we look at the different realms. We have physical, we have mental, but spiritual is such a big part of, I think, what really drives this long-term survival in law enforcement. Like, is our brain space right? Yes, but our brain space is right because we understand, like those guys I was talking about earlier, like we serve a higher power. Like we are called into this by more than just ourselves.
Mhm.
And knowing that, then we should strive to be physically the best and technically the best and intellectually the best. And then make sure that, hey, when we need a mental health break, like take it. Texas recently just passed that all law enforcement agencies will offer mental health leave for first responders, and that's firefighters, that's EMS, that's law enforcement. Like it is so important that, hey, when things aren't right, it's time to get them right
Yeah.
and allow your people the ability to, and then encourage them and empower them and give them the tools required to be able to actually do it. And so we can buy fitness programming, but if you don't follow that up with sound combatives, then they're going to be this jack dude in a bar ditch somewhere rolling around with some turd and they're not going to know what to do. And then because they didn't know what to do, now their mental health game is completely screwed. And so you see how we have to layer this all in to a whole person approach of wellness. Like there's not a single pain point in the culture. And I think as we get more of these young motivated guys in, you'll see an upswing in the culture and you'll see them start polishing out some of those rough edges. Like I still went to work and there were guys, and mind you, it's only been, a dozen years ago. There's still guys using derogatory terms to talk about people and meant it.
Mm.
Like we're not that far away from some of that stuff. But we're starting to see a real positive trend where it doesn't matter where you are, where you came from, what you look like, or what you believe in. Um, we all prioritize each other and the community at large. And it's exciting to see like, we're starting to see some of these law enforcement leaders really stepping out and speaking their faith. Like, yes, that's the revival that we need so that now the whole person is coming up and they're bringing others along with them.
No, first of all, I want to say that I think that you're so well spoken and I love you relating things to like the knife and it's such a great visual to understand. And when you talked about and you put this in the context of physical, right? And I was shaking my head because I completely agree. Sometimes the symptom is not the cause. Right. And so, like, if we're taking a super simple example of physical, and you said this, like, if someone came up to me and was like, man, my knee hurts. Like, how can and I've had people say this, how can I stretch out my knee? And I'm like, well, it's not your knee. That's not the problem. That's the symptom, right? Your knee is hurting because either you have really tight hips or you have really tight ankles or both, right? And the knee takes the brunt. So how can we start to open up your hips and open up your ankles to, try to protect the knee or how, to alleviate some of that pain? It's the same thing with the back. If someone's like, I have back pain, what can we do? And you said a couple things like there's posture, there's core activation, there's opening up your hips and hamstrings and your glutes. Like there are things that we need to do surrounding the symptom to find the solution. And I think that we start to see that a lot of times with actions and reactions to things. Sometimes if you see someone respond in maybe a negative way, it might not be because of that particular situation. It could be because of a different call or a life situation going on. The symptom of what is happening is different than, that that problem in itself. And so I think that we have to take a look at things from a broader viewpoint instead of being like, okay, your knee hurts, let's work on your knee, because oftentimes it's not that. How can we zoom out a little bit? And I wanted to touch on two more things, and I know we're running a little bit short, but one is, you said combatives and really making sure that officers have the tools that they need on the streets, physically, so that it gives them the confidence mentally to be able to go out there and do their job. And I know that there's some tactics that you have, started to focus on, one of which a lot of the organizations I work with are starting to do, and it's jiu-jitsu, or a hybrid of jiu-jitsu for defensive tactics. Can you explain maybe some of the positive results that you've seen from introducing this into law enforcement, and how you're building that confidence for people to go out and be able to do those combatives and those movements on the street?
So a lot of that starts with, especially as like it goes back to physical fitness. So are you physically capable of moving your body through space? Because at the end of the day, it's moving your body, moving someone else's body through space is really all combatives is. But some positive trends, and I won't say the agency because I can't quite remember which one it is, but there's one in North Georgia. They required all their officers to train in jiu-jitsu at least a couple times a week, and they saw a massive decrease in excessive force complaints,
Mhm.
and officers getting injured in fights and suspects getting injured in fights went way down. Like you see all these positive trends when you have good instruction. Now it's continuing to build that whole package of people because like any combative art, whether it's knife fighting, whether it's shooting, whether it's hand-to-hand grappling, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, all of those are designed to gain some control over somebody else.
Mhm.
When we understand we have to first control ourselves and know how to control ourselves, then we can get a whole lot better at those other things.
Mhm.
But just as far as combatives go, um, in jiu-jitsu in particular, it's not the be all end all, but it's pretty daggum good. When you can make somebody or get somebody in a position where they can't do anything to you and it looks good on camera, now we're starting to make some real progress with public perception. I know we've all seen these vehicles of, officers who are training doing a double leg takedown to a knee on top, and then the suspect is handcuffed in 15 seconds, and everybody's going like, man, that looked really good. Like, yeah, that dude trains regularly, and it's important. Now his cardio is getting better, his grip strength is getting better, which also improves your shooting.
Mhm.
And he has the confidence to know that, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z to this person, and it's going to protect them and me that much better. And so, seeing people start applying jujitsu to law enforcement problems, not necessarily taking law enforcement into jujitsu, but applying jujitsu to law enforcement problems to find that solution. I think we're starting to see some really excellent things. And last point on that, and this is just a personal story of mine. I'd been through a particular instructor course and come back. I ended up working the opposite side of the county one day, and I hear, someone was attempting to get suicided by cop.
Mhm.
They're, police assisted suicide, so to speak, with a knife. And these two officers, we kind of debriefed afterwards because we're hearing it all on the radio. And they said, "Hey, we're never going to let somebody get that close to us with a knife again. Like that was unnecessary." So you fast forward a couple months, and we have this woman. We're trying to evict her from her house. Well, the constable is, and we're out there to assist because she said, "Hey, if you evict me, I'm going to stab you." Like,
Mhm.
well, I'm down to party, so we all show up, and she actually, because jujitsu and because combatives trains you to see behavioral tells.
Mhm.
I could tell she was about to start reaching for the knife. So I moved almost simultaneously with her, kept her from getting to it before I got on top of her, and was able to use a good like knee on top and tracking the blade to to safely get her into custody rather than because those same two officers were on that call as well.
Mm.
And, we had all talked about it and, the debrief of that little incident, we're like, man, I thank the good Lord that I was in the position that I was in to be able to handle that because I was blessed enough to have the tools and the training and the confidence to be able to handle that against an edged weapon. And now she's still a royal pain in the rear end to anyone who has to deal with her, but she's still alive, and so are all the good guys. And there's no emotional scarring that goes along with having to take a life.
And I think that the key word is confidence, being able to confidently do your job. And I'm glad that you brought up public perception because we know right now, like, it's a tough environment. And public perception is so hard on policing all across the country. And, like you said, looking good on camera because we know that one bad situation gets blown up on social media and really just, that verbiage of like, cuts everyone off at the knees. It's like all the good work that you've done consistently goes without notice. And then you have the one situation that there's a clip of a video where there's not the full context of what happened, gets exploded on all the media outlets, and now everyone is viewed in the same way. And I think that the more you can have those moments, like you said, that look good on camera, and I know it's such a weird conversation to have, but it's the reality, is that, we have not only body cameras, but we have everyone around with their phones, filming things. If you can have more situations, more confidence to handle situations that look good to the public, then the more, positive public image can start to create. So it's a challenging topic.
Without a doubt. But like everything else we're talking about, it's a generational swing, right? Like we have to take these small steps, and
Yeah.
eventually the momentum will shift.
I agree. The last topic I want to really kind of touch on, because you've said it a lot during this conversation, is your faith. And we know that spiritual wellness is a key pillar in wellness programming across the country. You have physical, mental, emotional, financial, spiritual. And I don't think that spiritual is touched on in detail. It's kind of something that's brushed over because I think that, obviously everyone's going to have their own belief systems. And so I was really curious, how faith has played a role in your career, your resilience, and how it's helped you to create more of that longevity for yourself.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's everything. Especially for me, and when you come from the Judeo-Christian background and you believe that Christ is your Savior and you believe that Christ is God in the flesh, but though he was equal to God, he did not consider that as something to be grasped, but humbled himself and came to serve and be obedient to the point of death, even to death on a cross. I think when we start thinking less of ourselves and more about how we can serve other people, it takes the us factor out of it. Like, don't get me wrong, we have to be well and we have to be better, and we are called to serve and be head and shoulders above. But when we take the mindset that my ego, my pride, who I am doesn't matter, it's all for these other people. And again, as law enforcement, we see kind of the worst of society. We see the worst of society on their worst day.
Mm.
and and a lot of times that's really tough. One of the hardest days, we had a few boys get electrocuted by a transmission line, and we had to go get them out of the water, and they're still in our boat, and we have news media calling us, and like I just remember being so mad that like they were more interested in this story
Mm.
than what we were actually dealing with at that point. But from my perspective and understanding that God is sovereign over all, and he is in complete control over the good and the bad. My wife sent me a verse that was on someone's email signature in Habakkuk 3:7. 17 to 19. He says, even though the fields are dry, even though the cattle is, starving to death, even though everything seems to be going poorly, yet still I will exalt you, God, because he is in control. And these hard parts are presented to us so that we may be better, we may be refined as though by fire through them, and understanding that he is in complete control, oftentimes in spite of us and the decisions that we make. um, Gives me just such a great confidence to know that, like, yes, I can see the worst people on their worst day in the worst situation, but God's still in control. And somehow I will be better for this, or someone else will be better for this. But as Habakkuk says, like, I will still exalt you, God, no matter what's going on. And having that surety and that faith and that grounding in something bigger than ourselves, I think is such a huge part. And it gives us confidence to know that, like, yeah, no matter what happens today, someone more powerful than me is in control. And and if it makes me better, and it makes me more pure and more sanctified, and I can give God the glory and all that, then it doesn't really matter what I go through.
To me, everything that you just said is a resiliency mindset. Like it's giving you that confidence to keep going. And I think that regardless of anyone who's listening, regardless of what your particular faith is, I think everyone needs that. Like they need
Yeah.
something to believe in to keep going and to not give up and to understand that, like you said, like it might look like the hardest of times, but not only can you get through it, but it's an opportunity for you to grow and to learn. And to me, like that's what resiliency is. And so, for anyone who's listening, it's a reminder that there are a lot of different pillars of wellness. Spiritual wellness is a piece of it. And it's obviously helping, individuals like yourself to um, become more resilient and to have a long successful career. So I appreciate you sharing that with me. I thought that that was really powerful. And I have one final question for you, and we'll wrap for the day. But what words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known or something that's helped you along the way.
Go be a firefighter. No, I'm kidding. No, prioritize the important things. And a lot of that comes with understanding what the important things are. It's the physical, it's the mental, it's the spiritual things. But outside of the career, you know, prioritize your family. A captain that, he and I didn't always agree on a whole lot, but one piece of advice he gave me in my academy, and I would encourage all others to follow this kind of prioritization, is number one is God. Number two is your family. The job and everything else come after that. So you keep the important things the important things. At the end of the day, is this a career, and do you cater your lifestyle to work here? Absolutely. But if you kill yourself for the job and your wife leaves you, and you're left with no hope and no promise of a future afterwards, that job's going to drop you like a you know what, and it's not worth it. So prioritize your faith, prioritize your family over and above even the job. And when you get those priorities right, you start making better decisions. And then at the end of the day, you look back in 10 or 15 or 20 years and realize, man, I'm way better now than I thought I could ever be.
Hmm. Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. I know I took more than I asked, so thank you for coming on here. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. I appreciate you.
Well, I did too. Thank you for having me. And I apologize that I got a little long-winded on you, but
No, I thought
I
it was
enjoyed it
me.
very
I was
much.
like, I want to keep going. So thank you. Thank you for being here and thank you for all that you're doing in this profession. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.